Selamat pagi Bapak Ibu, izinkan kami dari Bahasa Global untuk membacakan panduan pada webinar pada pagi hari ini. Good morning ladies and gentlemen, allow us from Bahasa Global to present the user guide for the webinar today. Berikut panduan cara mengaktifkan fitur penerjemahan pada aplikasi Zoom. Apabila Bapak atau Ibu menggunakan laptop atau PC, pada bagian pojok kanan bawah akan terdapat lambang bola dunia. Mohon untuk diklik Language Interpretation dan memilih bahasa yang Bapak atau Ibu ingin dengarkan. Mohon tidak perlu mute original audio dan tidak perlu pindah channel saat berbicara. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are accessing the Zoom using a laptop or PC, simultaneous interpretation services are available. You can go to the bottom right of your screen. There you will find globe icon or language interpretation button. Right of your screen. You will find globe icon or language interpretation button. Click it and select the language that you wish to listen. We recommend you to not mute original audio, and if you would like to speak, you don't have to turn off the interpretation button as well. Bila Bapak atau Ibu mengakses meeting kali ini menggunakan HP atau mobile phone, fitur penerjemahan secara simultan juga tersedia. Bila Bapak atau Ibu ke pojok kanan bawah, akan ada 3 titik. Jika diklik akan ada Language Interpretation. Lalu klik, pilih bahasa yang Bapak atau Ibu ingin dengarkan. Dan tidak perlu mute original audio. Dan terakhir, jangan lupa klik done bila sudah selesai. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are accessing the Zoom using a mobile phone, simultaneous interpretation services are available. You can go to the bottom right of your screen. There you will find 3 dots. Click it and click Language Interpretation, and select the language that you wish to listen. We also recommend you to not mute original audio. And don't forget to click done when you have selected. Bapak dan Ibu, guna memastikan kelancaran pertemuan pada pagi hari ini, host atau co-host berhak melakukan mute audio atau stop video para peserta yang tidak sedang bicara. Mereka tanpa sengaja menyebabkan gangguan terhadap acara. Ini dilakukan untuk menjamin suara pembicara dan juru bahasa tetap jelas. Terima kasih atas kerjasama Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Selamat beraktivitas. Ladies and gentlemen, please note to ensure the smooth running of today's meeting, the host or co-host reserve the right to force mute the audio or turn off the videos of participants who are not speaking that may be unintentionally causing disruption to the meeting. This is to ensure that the audio of the speaker and interpreter remains clear at all times. We thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Have a productive webinar. Untuk waktu dan tempat, saya persilahkan kepada MC Bapak Meksi untuk memulai webinar pada pagi hari ini. Terima kasih.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Yang terhormat Deputi Bidang Pengembangan Strategi dan Kebijakan Lembaga Kebijakan Pengadaan Barang dan Jasa Pemerintah, Ibu Sarah Sadika. Yang kami hormati Direktur Pengembangan Iklim Usaha dan Kerjasama Internasional, Ibu Dwi Wahyuni Kartianingsi. Yang kami hormati Country Director Asian Development Bank Indonesia, Bapak Jiro Tominaga. Yang kami hormati di Director Procurement Division 2 PPFD Asian Development Bank, Bapak Rustam Abdu Kayumov. Yang kami hormati para narasumber dari Asian Development Bank. Yang kami hormati Bapak Rizal Rifai, Independent Consultant. Yang kami hormati rekan-rekan dari LKPP, juga kementerian lembaga, serta para peserta dari pelaku usaha Indonesia yang kami banggakan. Puji dan syukur kita panjatkan kepada Tuhan Yang Maha Esa karena pertolongannya, kita dapat hadir dalam acara Business Opportunity Seminar, atau disingkat BOS, pada tanggal 27 dan akan dilanjutkan besok 28 Juli 2022. Hadirin yang berbahagia, kita akan mendengarkan beberapa sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh perwakilan dari LKPP maupun dari Asian Development Bank. Untuk kesempatan yang pertama, kita akan mendengarkan sambutan pembukaan oleh Direktur Pengembangan Iklim Usaha dan Kerjasama Internasional, Ibu Dwi Wahyuni Kartianingsih. Ibu Dwi, beliau biasa disapa demikian di LKPP, adalah Director for Business Climate Development and International Affairs. She is in charge in formulating strategies, policies, and guidelines regarding business climate and international cooperation in government procurement. She is also the lead negotiator for government procurement chapter in several FTAs. Ms. Dwi achieved her master degree in economics and public policy from School of Public Policy and Management, Korea Development Institute in Seoul, Korea, South Korea. Kepada Ibu Dwi, kami persilahkan.
Baik, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Terima kasih Pak Mas Meksi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Pertama-tama tentunya kami ucapkan terima kasih atas kesediaan Bapak Ibu sekalian untuk menghadiri seminar peluang usaha pada LKPP, di mana seminar peluang usaha ini adalah tahun kedua Bapak Ibu kami melaksanakannya, karena di tahun pertama kami mendapatkan atensi yang cukup baik dari para peserta, dan kemudian tentunya kami ucapkan terima kasih kepada narasumber dan juga tentunya kepada Asian Development Bank yang pagi ini bersama-sama kita semua ingin membagikan bagaimana proses pengadaan barang jasa yang dilaksanakan di Asian Development Bank. Terima kasih kepada Pak Jiro dan Pak Rahmat serta seluruh narasumber pada kegiatan ini. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, seperti kita ketahui bahwa pengadaan barang jasa pemerintah itu didanai sebesar-besarnya adalah dari APBN, tetapi kita ketahui juga bahwa ada pengadaan barang jasa yang dilakukan oleh organisasi internasional. Dalam hal ini adalah para mitra pembangunan, di mana ADB adalah salah satunya Bapak Ibu. Dan kita perlu ketahui juga bahwa ini adalah suatu opportunity bagi Bapak Ibu pelaku usaha untuk mengetahui bagaimana cara memasuki atau cara mendapatkan paket pengadaan pada internasional organisasi tersebut, yang salah satunya adalah Asian Development Bank. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, kalau kita bicara pengadaan barang jasa, tentunya ini adalah sinergi dari kementerian, lembaga, pemerintah daerah sebagai pemilik pekerjaan atau yang membutuhkan pengadaan barang jasa pemerintah, kemudian pelaku usaha sebagai supplier atau yang yang menyediakan barang jasa pemerintah, dan tentunya end user-nya adalah masyarakat. End user-nya adalah seluruh rakyat Indonesia dalam hal ini. Dan Bapak Ibu, untuk pekerjaan atau paket pekerjaan yang dilakukan di internasional organisasi tersebut, dalam hal ini adalah ADB, ini adalah merupakan suatu opportunity atau kesempatan usaha untuk pelaku usaha yang mana nantinya tentunya akan mengenerate income buat pelaku usaha dan juga mengenerate PDB untuk Indonesia. Bapak Ibu, oleh sebab itu seminar hari ini adalah bertujuan menjadi ajang berbagi informasi dan pengalaman mengenai pengadaan barang jasa internasional antara pelaku usaha, mitra pembangunan, dan tentunya kementerian dan juga lembaga terkait, Bapak Ibu. Paling tidak ada 4 tujuan dari kegiatan ini. Yang pertama adalah, saya rasa ini slide-nya sebelumnya ya. Jadi tujuan itu adalah selain memberikan informasi kepada pelaku usaha, ya, tetapi juga ingin meningkatkan kompetensi pelaku usaha kita sendiri, Bapak Ibu. Jadi dengan mulai mempersiapkan penawaran yang berkualitas dan responsif tentunya untuk proyek-proyek pengadaan yang didanai mitra pembangunan, tetapi juga bisa memperluas pengetahuan pelaku usaha itu sendiri tentang praktik terbaik di internasional untuk pengadaan barang jasa pemerintah, tentunya menggunakan regulasi pengadaan dari mitra pembangunan. Dan akhirnya kami berharap bahwa setelah melaksanakan atau mengikuti seminar hari ini, pelaku usaha nasional akan berminat atau meningkatkan minat pelaku usaha untuk berpartisipasi dalam pengadaan yang didanai oleh mitra pembangunan, yang paketnya itu adalah kebutuhan dari mitra pembangunan. Dalam hal ini, pagi ini adalah Asian Development Bank. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, selanjutnya kami mengutarakan bahwa pada pagi ini kita adalah bersinergi ya Bapak Ibu ya, bersinergi antara kementerian lembaga pemerintah daerah, pelaku usaha nasional, dan tentunya mitra pembangunan. Oleh sebab itu kami sangat berterima kasih kepada pagi ini Asian Development Bank yang menjadi pertama memberikan sharing knowledge-nya pada pagi ini. Bapak Ibu sekalian, kami berencana untuk melaksanakan atau seminar peluang usaha ini yang ditujukan oleh pelaku usaha kita, yaitu pertama adalah pesertanya kami sasarannya adalah pelaku usaha itu sendiri, kemudian juga asosiasi pelaku usaha, dan tentunya kementerian dan lembaga terkait. Ketiga target ini tentunya akan kami harapkan membawa perubahan dalam pengadaan barang jasa atau kesempatan peluang usaha bagi pelaku usaha kita. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, untuk pagi ini acara kami pagi ini adalah peluang usaha yang akan dihantarkan oleh Asian Development Bank. Kemudian nanti pada tanggal 10 Agustus itu diikuti oleh UNDP dan selanjutnya oleh mitra pembangunan lain. Dapat kami sampaikan di slide berikutnya, ini adalah schedule kami untuk seminar peluang usaha di next slide. Ya, jadi untuk hari ini oleh Asian Development Bank, kemudian tanggal 10 Agustus nanti adalah oleh UNDP, kemudian juga tanggal 31 Agustus oleh Islamic Development Bank, dan nanti akan juga ada peluang usaha untuk World Bank, tetapi masih to be discussed untuk tanggalnya. Dan tentunya Bapak Ibu pelaku usaha, mungkin Bapak Ibu yang memiliki relasi teman, silahkan untuk menginformasikan acara ini, boleh mengikuti dari, mungkin kalau hari ini tidak ada waktu, bisa mengikuti peluang usaha lainnya pada schedule yang sudah kami siapkan. Kira-kira demikian Bapak Ibu, dan kami haturkan terima kasih, juga permohonan maaf dari Ibu Deputi yang sedianya membuka pada pagi ini, tetapi karena satu dan lain hal, beliau menugaskan saya untuk membuka acara ini. Bapak Ibu sekalian, selamat mengikuti seminar dan raihlah kesempatan berusaha. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih untuk Ibu Direktur, Ibu Dwi yang sudah menyampaikan sambutan pertama untuk membuka kegiatan seminar peluang usaha kita pada pagi hari ini. Selanjutnya kita akan mendengarkan sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Country Director Asian Development Bank Indonesia, Bapak Jiro Tominaga. Pak Jiro Tominaga adalah Country Director Indonesia Resident Mission Asian Development Bank. Dan beliau has almost 30 years of professional experience, including over 6 years with the Asian Development Bank. Mr. Tominaga is a national of Japan. He holds a master's degree in economics from London School of Economics, United Kingdom, and a bachelor's degree in economics from Keio University, Japan. Kepada Pak Jiro Tominaga, kami persilahkan.
Thank you very much, Ibu Dwi Wahyuni Kartian Ningsi, Director, Business Climate Development and International Affairs, LKPP. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great pleasure to welcome all participants to this Business Opportunity Seminar. The success of ADB-supported projects and programs depends critically on the quality of consultants, contractors, and suppliers that work with us. Therefore, sessions such as these are incredibly important for us, and we greatly appreciate your participation. I would like to present to you ADB's operational priorities in Indonesia. However, before I do that, I wanted to recognize the special relationship that ADB and Indonesia share. Indonesia is a founding member of ADB, its 6th largest shareholder, and one of the largest sovereign borrowers. Our work in Indonesia is now delivered through 3 strategic pathways. The first pathway on strengthening well-being focuses on improving health and social protection systems and enabling innovation in education. The second pathway on accelerating economic recovery supports policy reforms in competitiveness, financial inclusion, domestic resource mobilization, SOE reforms, which are very important for a sustained recovery following the COVID-19 pandemic. This pathway also includes investments in quality infrastructure, in road and urban transport, livable cities, and energy supply and access. The third pathway supports enhanced resilience. This includes mitigating and adapting to climate change, reducing the risks from natural disasters and pandemics, strengthening food and water security, and environmental sustainability. Currently, ADB's active sovereign loan portfolio exceeds $5.5 billion, with energy and public sector management sectors accounting for approximately 40% and 30% of lending, respectively. Agriculture and natural resources sector accounts for 16% of lending, while remainder is split among education, finance, transport, and urban sectors. Active technical assistance portfolio stands at around $28 million. The potential lending operations under different stages of consideration reach up to $3.5 billion per year between 2023 and 2025. The energy sector accounts for 27% of these potential operations, reflecting continued support to energy policy reform, as well as an expansion of ADB's assistance to energy transition. Public sector management accounts for 29%, which includes support for policy-based reforms, for increased competitiveness, human capital development. Transport and health are expected to account for 15% and 10% respectively. We will also be seeking an expansion of ocean health and blue projects under the Blue Southeast Asia Finance Hub, which is housed in our office in Indonesia. As ADB lending grows, it will generate compelling business opportunities for organizations such as those represented here. Our hope is that this session, this morning and tomorrow, will help you better understand and pursue these opportunities. Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope you have a good discussion. Thank you.
Baik, terima kasih untuk sambutan yang sudah disampaikan oleh Bapak Jiro Tominaga. Hadirin sekalian, kita akan melanjutkan untuk mendengarkan sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Director Procurement Division 2 PPFD, Bapak Rustam Abdul Kayumov. Beliau adalah Director of Procurement Division 2 of ADB's Procurement Portfolio and Financial Management Department. Mr. Rustam Abdul Kayumov has been with ADB for 21 years. Mr. Rustam Abdul Kayumov is a national of Uzbekistan. He obtained his master's degree in Oriental Studies in 1989 from Tashkent State University. Kepada Pak Rustam Abdul Qayyumov kami persilahkan.
Thank you so much, Ms. Soyan, and assalamu alaikum to all distinguished guests, representatives of the government agencies, all our business partners and colleagues in Indonesia. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this virtual business opportunities seminar. I would like to thank our host organization, National Public Procurement Agency, LKPP, for helping us in organizing these events. And I would like to extend my thanks to Ms. Dwi for the opening remarks, and Mr. Sayan and Ms. Sarika for your kind support in organizing this event. I would also like to thank Mr. Jiro Taminaga, Country Director for Indonesia Resident Mission, for your warm words and continuous support in strengthening cooperation between Indonesia and ADB. As you all know, this is the third year as ADB conducts business opportunities seminars virtually. Jointly with the LKPP, we have organized one BOS last year, which was quite successful, and we are happy to have an opportunity to meet again with the business community of Indonesia this year. In 2020, we conducted 34 business opportunity seminars. In 2021, this figure went up to 54 business opportunity seminars in different countries. And we are glad to see that there is a growing interest from business communities to continue with the virtual format. But we also hope that we will soon start organizing BOS in persons, and that we will be able to host a business opportunities fair in Manila or in one of our developing member countries. I believe today we have representatives from consulting industry, from contractors, suppliers of goods, and all other partners who are interested to work together with ADB in the design and implementation of projects. Let me give you some figures. In 2021, ADB provided more than 200 million for consulting services that ADB administers. This means that ADB does recruitment of consultants and manages these contracts. We financed close to 2,700 contracts with individual consultants and more than 250 contracts with firms. But we have to remember that in addition to this, there are many consulting opportunities under loans and grants, which are managed by our borrowers. In 2021, ADB borrowers have spent about 700 million for such activities. ADB portfolio has been growing during the last few years despite the pandemic, and we see that borrowers need larger and more complex projects. And therefore, there is an increasing demand from the borrower side for good civil work contractors, for good consulting firms, good individual consultants, and all these opportunities are advertised on ADB website. We know that the large contractors often have offices in the countries where they would like to work, and they monitor such opportunities very closely. As for consulting industry, since the number of firms is much, much bigger, and the area of expertise in the consulting industry is much, much more diverse, not many firms are fully aware of all the opportunities available within ADB. So today and tomorrow, we'll try to close this gap and share some information that might be helpful to all of you who are interested to work with ADB. This BOS is a two-day event. During the first day, we will focus on ADB's operations in the transport and urban sector, followed by a presentation about ADB's procurement policy, procurement processes, and opportunities available to our partners. Tomorrow, we will cover the energy sector and doing business with the ADB's Office of Public-Private Partnership, and we will also describe opportunities for consulting industries. As we see in many countries, borrowers need consulting support not only in traditional areas of project implementation and monitoring, but in technically more complex areas, such as detailed engineering design, field surveys, computer modeling, procurement and construction supervision, where consultants act as engineers. We also note that borrowers are looking for good contractors who can implement large infrastructure contracts, especially on EPC or turnkey basis. These are the contractors who have experience in the designing and construction of large facilities. There are also more and more contracts that have operation and maintenance components. And most commonly, these contracts are in the water sector for construction of water treatment and wastewater treatment plants. But we see increasing demand for O&M component in other sectors. Since more complex projects are being prepared, new technical solutions, innovations in project design are also an area of interest for ADB. And I hope you will be able to share your experience with ADB colleagues, as we know that there are many strong contractors and consultants from Indonesia who are working not only on ADB projects in Indonesia, but also under ADB finance projects in many other countries. So despite the pandemic, life goes on, and we will continue our collaboration with the business partners around the world. And I hope you will find today's and tomorrow's event very useful. I hope it will help you to better understand how ADB operates. And finally, I hope it will help you win contracts under ADB projects. So I'm wishing you a successful seminar, and now we'll hand over to Mr. Soyan. Thank you.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Rustam untuk sambutan yang sudah disampaikan. Bapak Ibu sekalian, peserta kegiatan atau acara Business Opportunity Seminar, kita akan melanjutkan untuk topik selanjutnya atau diskusi selanjutnya yang akan dimoderatori oleh Bapak Theodor Sutarto. Kepada Pak Theo kami persilahkan.
Ya, terima kasih Bang Meksi. Perkenalkan, saya Theodor Sutarto dari LKPP. Hari ini saya akan memandu acara pada hari ini. Sebelum saya mulai, saya ingin mengingatkan kembali, di Zoom Anda ada fitur Q&A, di mana nanti pada saat narasumber kita sedang memberikan materi juga bisa langsung menyampaikan pertanyaan pada Q&A yang ada di bawah, atau jika ingin bertanya langsung bisa mengklik icon raise hand. Dan karena hari ini dari ADB, saya izin menggunakan bahasa Inggris hari ini. Okay, thank you distinguished speakers from ADB and also Pak Riza Rifai, our procurement specialist from Indonesia who has already won bids from ADB's project. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Bertrand Hualu. I hope I correctly spell the name. He's a principal transport specialist and sustainable development and climate change department from ADB. With 20 years of experience in the sector, Mr. Bertrand's expertise covers all stages of the project cycle. He joined ADB in 2010 as a project team leader and devised sustainable urban transport projects in Central West Asia with a focus of innovative and transformative solutions. He was a second D out of the agents Francois de Development from 2016 to 2020, where he led the AFD urban transport portfolio and implement projects in Africa and Asia. Prior to joining ADB, Mr. Bertrand held various project director positions in leading transportation engineering firms. Mr. Bertrand holds a postgraduate degree in urban planning and transport from Paris Tech, France, 2001, and master degree in civil engineering and urban planning from National Institute of Applied Science in France in 1998. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Bertrand. The screen is yours, and we do have a tight schedule here, so hopefully you can deliver your presentation in 15 minutes. Mr. Bertrand? Yes, very good morning, Mr. Bertrand. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Theodore, for the introduction. Good day to all. Good morning. Very happy to be here with you today. I cannot see the slide on the screen, but I think it's coming. As we are waiting, I just would like to mention, as it was said a moment ago, I've spent quite some time working for the private sector in planning, engineering, and construction supervision. And so like most of the ADB colleagues that are with us today, I've been on the project implementation side. So we can easily relate to your perspective and question that you may be asking yourself. Next slide, please. Yeah, so no, the previous one. Yeah, so let's jump right into it and talk about the transport sector and the perspective we have at ADB looking at transportation. So this is how we are looking at the transport sector in ADB when supporting our developing member countries and private sector clients. Low carbon, safe, accessible, and affordable transport system and services. We could also add, as you have already heard, the flavor of efficiency, innovation, very important, resilience, climate, and alignment with international agreements, as well as sustainability of operation and assets. So that's very ambitious, and ambitious is what we will be discussing in our next slide. Next slide, please. Now, transport investment by subsector, lending volumes and trends. Transport is approximately 1/4 of ADB's sovereign lending volume. The share of each subsector is fluctuating depending on the year. This comes from the fact that we are often financing large projects, and such projects have huge impact on the share of the said subsector on a given year. All told, road projects are now below 50%, and that is no coincidence. Our intention is to scale up urban transport and railway projects. We can also see the changes in the portfolio breakdown since the early 90s. And again, urban transport and rail transport are in gray and orange, again, clearly increasing. Next slide, please. So, and as you can see, this increase is continued here in our near future pipeline. Next slide. The overarching targets of ADB strategy 2030 is to build a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and the Pacific. And ADB is clearly getting away from pure infrastructure finance. I think it has been made clear from the introductions by colleagues. And we favor more integrated solution with high value addition. We have here the 7 operational priorities of ADB strategy that is translated into the area of focus in Indonesia. So we have poverty reduction, gender, climate change, livable city, rural development and food security, governance, and the last one is regional cooperation and integration. The transport sector, as you can see and as you understand, contributes to all of the 7 operational priorities. And other than operational priorities, strategy is looking at value addition through finance, knowledge, and partnership, including with the private sector. And lastly, promoting innovative technology as well as delivering integrating solution are strong guiding principle. So what's the main takeaway for you here? It's certainly on value addition, innovative technology, and integrated solution. And in case, and I'm sure most of you have this competitive advantage, so if it is something that you have in the sector, something you may want to make sure is part of your proposal and bids, and it's clearly put forward. Next slide. We really see transport as an enabler of development, and this is how it contributes to the various dimensions of ADB strategy 2030. With, again, the operational priority we had on the previous slide. would like to insist on a strong focus on maintenance and asset management for sustainability, including financial sustainability, which are key factors that need to be included early in the project design. We would also like to underscore the climate agenda and the international agreement, which are placed at the center of our strategy, and the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. There is clearly an increased focus on supporting and developing climate-aligned projects and resilient infrastructure. Next slide. So on this slide and next, we'll give you an indication of the type of project being implemented and upcoming. We'll also play 2 short videos as project visuals speak louder than words. Before going to the project, I would like to mention that complete information on all ADB finance and ADB supported project is available on the ADB website. So you will find useful information by country and by project. So by country, that means that you will find the business plan for each country. The same has been agreed between the government and ADB. This is a yearly exercise, so the document is kept updated, and you will see the project and technical assistance for approval for the next 3-4 years. That includes the lending and the non-lending products, which mean loans as well as technical assistances. Now by project, and that's really important for you to understand that everything is disclosed, including the project details and, more importantly, the procurement plan, with a clear indication not only of the procurement strategy, but also of the contracts and packages. That usually includes the contract amounts and the procurement method, including, and also the tentative date for advertisement. So those are very strong sources of information. It's not just for transport, it's really for all sector. So now on Central West Asia region, so we are basically covering all transport subsector except maritime. We have this CAREC program, which is on regional integration, all modes, including roads and railways. So we also have a strong focus on road maintenance and road safety, and increasing focus and with some flagship project on urban transport. Next slide, please. And talking about urban transport, this is our first video. It's a Peshawar bus rapid transit system in Pakistan that has been commissioned back in 2020. And that will show you the kind of approach we favor and the signature project that has been developed jointly with the authorities in Peshawar. So I guess we are playing the video now. Thank you.
हयाताबाद से मैं यहाँ पे जब आता था लोकल ट्रांसपोर्ट पे तो कम से कम 1 घंटा 1.5 घंटा लग जाता था। ये ज़ू पेशावर की बसेस जो हैं ये फुली एयर कंडीशन है, प्लस इसमें हीटर भी लगे हुए हैं। इसके अलावा वाईफाई की सहूलत भी अवेलेबल है और चार्जिंग पोर्ट भी आपके लिए अवेलेबल है बसेस में।
I was harassed by this taxi driver You feel safe when you think that you are every time protected and cameras watching you.
Previous transport systems में ये impossible था हमारे लिए उसको ऑपरेट करना, क्योंकि उसमें तो व्हीलचेयर का सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता था कि आप व्हीलचेयर के साथ उसमें चढ़ सकते थे। तो जहाँ तक BRT की बात है, क्रॉस डिसेबिलिटी के लिए यूनिवर्सली एक्सेसिबल है। हम इसमें बगैर किसी के मदद लिए हुए हम इसमें रोज़ाना सफ़र कर सकते हैं।
Nowadays, if you ask anybody in Peshawar, and the Peshawar BRT is something they will be very proud of talking about it. It creates a lot of quality food passes. It has new energy efficient street lights. It provides much clean passenger vehicles, and it generates a much nicer environment. In terms of urban mobility, the system encourages people from all walks of the life to use the public transport, and it's really changing and transforming the city.
So as you can see here, this kind of project is not just about urban transport. It's really a project that is transforming the city and genuinely with all these dimensions that have been presented to you. And it's not just in Pakistan, we are supporting this type of project across the regions. Next slide, please. So now South Asia, you will find and see a strong focus again on mass transit and urban transport. So of the key projects have been listed here, but there is much more. Railway also is increasing, and just as in other region, the kind of assistance we are providing follow the entire cycle of the project, from the technical assistance and support to the upstream dialogue for project identification, and until the commissioning and also support for operation. There is also in South Asia a focus on the upgrade of existing infrastructure. We're now gonna show you a second video that is the Delhi Meerut rapid regional transit system. Again, very short, but I think it's the best way to give you a glimpse of the kind of project we are supporting. So this time is a commuter rail, and I think it's on the next slide, and then we'll play the video. So as you can see, it's a really large size. It's almost 4 billion projects. And it's one of the 8 corridors that have been planned to be developed in the Delhi region. So now I think we can play the video. Thank you.
The National Capital Region, or NCR, is the largest urban agglomeration in India and centered around India's capital city, New Delhi, and encompasses several surrounding districts. With a total population of more than 46 million that is spread over an area of over 58,000 square kilometers, NCR generates nearly 8% of India's GDP. However, most of the socio-economic development of NCR has been centered around Delhi, which accounts for 37% of the total population of NCR, while covering less than 5% of the NCR area. With Delhi projected to be the most populous city in the world in 2028, there will be tremendous pressure on its infrastructure that will cost 12% of Delhi's GDP in terms of air pollution, fatalities, wasted fuel, and reduced productivity. Thus, there is a need to shift to polycentric developmental approach where surrounding parts within NCR are able to absorb this pressure from Delhi. The Functional Plan on Transport for NCR 2032 has identified 8 regional rapid transit systems, RRTS, corridors to connect the towns in NCR with high-speed rail-based commuter transit services. 3 regional rapid transit system corridors, Delhi Meerut, Delhi Alwar, and Delhi Panipat, will be developed under Phase 1, with Sarai Kale Khan as the common station. The first corridor connecting Delhi to Meerut will span a distance of 82 kilometers and have world-class transport infrastructure supporting average speeds of 100 kilometers per hour. It is expected to reduce the travel time from 3.5 hours to about 1 hour. Asian Development Bank will co-finance the capital expenditure and envisages a 3-pronged outcome from the project: commissioning the Delhi-Meerut RRTS corridor, strengthening the institutional capacity of NCRTC, improving mobility and economic opportunities for women and differently abled. ADB will provide finance plus support that will include building multimodal integrated station, technical assistance for exploring transit-oriented development, and selection of a shadow operator. The project will have well-lit and CCTV cameras, supervised coaches, and public areas in all stations, as well as patrolling by security guards to ensure safety of women. Further, mobility, visual, and hearing assistive aids will be provided to 1,000 differently abled persons. Overall, the project is expected to have a substantial demonstration effect and pave the way for integrated mobility and sustainable development of NCR.
Okay, so being cautious of time, we'll go to the next slide. So transport assistance in Southeast Asia region, again, regional cooperation, urban transport increasing. We can see the Philippines and Thailand. Thailand is interesting when it comes to the PPP opportunities and scheme being developed. In the Philippines, ADB and its partner are supporting the development of infrastructure like the one you have seen in the video as well. I think I would like to mention that the kind of projects that are supported are both small scale and mega projects. So I think depending on the size and interest of your consulting firm or companies, there are different opportunities that you will see. Road and rail, also strong focus. Increasing focus on road safety, I think something we need to mention. And multi-sector approach. And as it was mentioned earlier, we have this continued dialogue with the government in Indonesia. And you have heard that transport and also urban transport, it's part of one of the pathways that were mentioned by the country director. Next slide, please. East Asia, so large projects have been developed in China. Now it's the support mainly goes to Mongolia, aligned with what we have said earlier, both on road safety, also looking at rail opportunity and urban transport. Next slide. come to the Pacific, so the projects are obviously slightly different. The size is different. We see a huge potential for maritime. The countries are listed here. In the region, we see the most costly maritime transportation costs. So there is really room for improvement of the infrastructure and more efficiency. Next slide. So the key messages and what I would like to leave you with is that there is an increased focus on climate, innovation, knowledge, and integrated solution, as well as sustainability of assets. Road is still 50% of our portfolio, so we continue to finance projects that are designed differently these days. Railway and urban transport is scaling up very quickly, including this mega size project you have seen, creating new opportunities for consulting firms with experience in this subsector and able to deliver on holistic approach and integrated solution. There is also a strong and increased focus on enabling proper operation and maintenance. Asset management is also something very important. So if that is, again, the kind of project you are able to support and deliver as consultant, supplier or contractor, you would definitely be able to play a role in this project that we are developing jointly with our DMC client. And I'm sure they would like to see and receive your proposal and see you taking part in the competition. I'll stop here. I'm happy to expand or answer any question in a Q&A. And now I'm turning it back to you, Mr. Theodore. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bertrand, for the interesting presentations. We would like to invite our colleagues from Indonesian business actors to have questions in icon below the Zoom Q&A icon, or you can raise your hands should you want to ask directly to Mr. Bertrand later on. After all of the speakers presented their presentations, they are already key message on Mr. Bertrand's last presentation. I would like to highlight several things. First of all, the transfer project value in ADB were increasing every year based on the data. And there are several highlights of projects in Central and West Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Pacific regions. And ADB is welcoming or invite innovative and competitive supplier as well as contractor and also consultant to join the project. We can also take a look at the informations on ADB website where all the projects in each country available and also additional informations should you require. The website is www.adb.org/workwithus/business opportunity. Okay, I would like to move on to our next presenters from the ADB, Mr. Amar. I hope I spelled the name correctly, Mr. Amar J. Kari. Yes, he's currently serve as a principal infrastructure specialist coordinating ADB infrastructure related to operations and disaster risk management intervention in Indonesia. And Mr. Kari has assumed other roles in ADB, including as secretary to the procurement committee responsible for approving high-value contracts funded under the bank's sovereign operations. Mr. Kari has also supported policy reform effort in fields of PPP or P3s, public procurement and construction management in ADB development member countries. Before joining ADB, Mr. Kari worked as a corporate lawyer and at Simpson Thacher and Bartlett in New York, and Mr. Kari holds the MBA in finance from Kellogg School of Management and Juris Doctor degree in law from Northwestern University School of Law. Mr. Kari, the screen is yours. I would like to remind you that you have 15-minute times to present your interesting projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. Assalamu alaikum, selamat pagi to all the participants. It is indeed a great pleasure for us to present to you. And what I would like to talk about this morning is ADB's support to Indonesia's urban sector. If we move to the first slide. So right off the bat, I think it's important to recognize that cities are the hubs of economic and social opportunities. By concentrating both labor and capital, they enable huge gains in productivity. So it should not come as any surprise that approximately 80% of global GDP can be traced back to cities. Now, making cities more livable is one of the key operational priorities that have been enshrined in ADB Strategy 2030. And this priority has actually also cascaded down to ADB's country partnership strategy with Indonesia. And you can see in the graphic over here under the pillar of accelerating economic recovery, that livable cities is very much there, and it is an all-encompassing concept. It also subsumes coverage, quality, efficiency, and reliability of urban services, integrated urban planning and financial sustainability, or climate resilience, as well as disaster management. Now, although rapid urbanization is linked to improved economic opportunities, it certainly creates complex challenges that we are all familiar with, such as climate change, environmental degradation, social inequality, pandemic, etc. If you go to the next slide, here we are trying to showcase to you that Indonesia has been urbanizing very rapidly, and about 150 million Indonesians live in an urban setting. What is also very important to recognize are the challenges that are being faced by the Indonesian population. You have high levels of poverty in the urban areas. There are limitations in terms of providing access to basic services, and simultaneously, we have large population segments living in or around coastal cities, exposing them to common hazards such as flooding, tsunamis, and communicable diseases. Now, as a lot of you probably already know, land subsidence is another key issue, and it has compounded flooding risk in cities such as Jakarta, Bandung, Semarang. If you go to the next slide, please. So what I want to do now is just give you a little bit of an overview of ADB's loans that are focused on the urban sector. And these are loans that are currently under implementation, and just want to showcase for you how they're addressing the critical needs of the sector. We start off with the Metropolitan Sanitation Project, which focuses on strengthening the sanitation system in the cities of Makassar, Pekanbaru, and Jambi. Then we also have a technical assistance loan, and this is kind of unique, but given the size of the loan, 143 million. And the whole focus of this loan is to actually prepare projects both for water supply as well as sanitation in around a dozen cities or so. Now, the downstream financing for these projects can come from the government's APBN budget, or also from development partners such as ADB. So the purpose over here is not just to have projects prepared for ADB, but for any other financing resources that are available to the Ministry of Public Works and Housing. Also want to touch on the emergency assistance for rehabilitation and reconstruction loan, which is also under implementation. This was approved following the tsunami and earthquake and liquefaction in central Sulawesi. The focus from an urban standpoint has been to rehabilitate both the water supply infrastructure, but also the airport as well as the port around Palu. Now, finally, we also have a contingent disaster financing facility, the purpose of which is to quickly disburse in the aftermath of a natural disaster or a pandemic once certain predetermined triggers have been met. Now, in this case, this loan has actually dispersed the $500 million already, but the power of the instrument is quite interesting because it gives us the platform to engage in wider discussions with different government counterparts on whether it's flood risk management, planning, or disaster response management, strengthening of building codes, creation of post-disaster needs assessment tools tailored towards urban areas, or even in terms of enhancing capacity of subnational governments to administer public assets and manage fiscal transfers during the post-disaster response. So it's a very versatile tool and very critical, because when a disaster does happen, we don't want there to be a delay. And by providing quick liquidity to the government in the aftermath of the disaster, we are able to significantly improve the developmental outcomes. If we go to the next slide, here we want to provide a little bit of an overview of the projects that we are aiming to get approved next year. And these are obviously the projects that would be of the greatest interest to organizations who are participating today because of the business opportunity angle. Now, the first one is the citywide inclusive sanitation project with the indicative financing amount of $310 million, implementation period 2024 to 2027. The focus over here is essentially to support 3 wastewater treatment plants and sewage network in Pontianak and Semarang. Now, the project preparation is still ongoing, but we are expecting that these plants will be tendered on a design-build basis, and the pipes will be delivered through multiple equipment supply packages. The second project to highlight is the flood management and coastal protection project focused on North Java. The implementation timeline 2023 to 2028. The indicative financing amount is $250 million. Now, the focus over here is to support an integrated water resources management approach to improve flood resilience as well as raw water supply in North Java. Essentially, the contracts over here, they're going to be multiple, focused on the strengthening of the riverbanks as well as dikes. There'll also be some packages for the flood forecasting and early warning systems. I think it might at this point also be quickly worth mentioning that in our lending pipeline, there are also some urban transport projects. And these are being designed for approval in 2024. The first one worth highlighting is a loan to the state-owned enterprise Damri for the procurement of electric buses as well as charging stations. And then we are also planning to provide a loan to the government for the Jakarta East-West MRT line. So these are also huge priorities for the government, and they are part of our current lending pipeline. If we can go to the next slide. Now, I also wanted to briefly highlight a particular technical assistance program that we have called SIAP, or the Sustainable Infrastructure Assistance Program. And it is very unique to our Indonesian operations. So you can see the amount over here, roughly about $31 million. It's primarily co-financed by the government of Australia. Now, the goal of this project is actually the technical assistance cluster is to support both project preparation as well as implementation of projects in priority sectors: energy, transport, urban services, water resources. What also makes this platform a little bit unique, that it has a component which is demand-driven, and it is able to bring in very timely and targeted knowledge and policy advisory support to both government and SOE counterparts. Over here on the slide to the right, you will see that I have mentioned a few CEAP interventions that are focused on urban development. The first involves support to undertake an environmental study in respect of the new capital. The study will map existing environmental features such as forests, water bodies, biodiversity, and map likely effects on the environment of the development of the new capital. Ultimately, the study will make recommendations with respect to master plan development to mitigate environmental risks. The second intervention involves support to the Ministry of Home Affairs to conceptualize a smart city capacity development program that can equip cities to successfully deploy information and communication technology to effectively and efficiently deliver public services. The third intervention involves support for preparation of a lending mechanism to provide mortgages to irregular income borrowers. This segment is falling through the cracks right now because it doesn't qualify for existing subsidy programs from the government and is deemed too risky by the banks. Now, as you know, under the National Medium-Term Development Plan, the expansion of access to affordable housing is a priority, and we are hoping that our loan in this regard is going to be very useful. Now, what I would certainly suggest is that the consultants in the audience right now should be on the lookout for opportunities that would be advertised, either related to these interventions that I have mentioned on the ADB website, or this technical assistance cluster is going to close in June 2024. So over the next 2 years or so, there will be additional opportunities that will be coming out that will be funded through the CEAP technical assistance. So please do watch this space very closely. And as my colleague Bertrand has mentioned, that all of these opportunities do get published on the ADB website. If we can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to end by briefly touching on an exciting initiative we have been exploring with government counterparts to streamline development of water supply projects. The scheme known as kind of source to tap is there to ensure that investments in raw water supply, water treatment, and distribution are integrated and well coordinated with suitable openings to bring in private sector investment. The current situation has been suboptimal, with investment decisions being made in a siloed setting without full visibility into the economics of both the demand side as well as the raw water supply. Now, our hope is that our suite of both sovereign and non-sovereign lending products, together with advisory support services, can help the government in identification, the preparation, and delivery of source to tap projects. I will end there. Happy to take any questions now or later this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kari, for a very interesting presentations. I would like to highlight that the urban sectors project currently or potentially will Indonesia have in the near future, including what already happened in Sulawesi, Kalimantan, Java, the current capital, and also the new capital later on in Kalimantan. So we also would like to highlight that the information is going to be also available in ADB website, www.adb.org/workwithus and /business opportunities. And we already have several Q&A also, and hopefully several audience could ask Mr. Kari about the potential project or any details about the projects that are going on in Indonesia. So I would like to stop here and like to move on to our next presenters. And also I would like to invite our audience, should they have any questions, to just click Q&A and click and type your questions, and we'll get back to you later on our special session, the Q&A sessions. And now we would like to move on to our next presenter or resource speaker, Ms. Galia Ismakova, currently the Principal Procurement Specialist in the ADB. And she has 28 years of work experience, including 21 years in ADB. She has been involved in promoting e-government procurement agenda, leading various ADB initiatives. She holds master's degree in philosophy from Tashkent State University and PhD in philosophy in Academy of Science, Republic of Uzbekistan, management development diploma following studies in EAE, the Aix-en Provence and Lancaster University Management School, and master's in business administration in University of Western Australia. Now she is associate member of Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development and a member of Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Ms. Galia, glad to having you here today, and hopefully you will also give us a lot of information regarding very interesting informations on ADB's project. Ms. Galia, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Theodore. Assalamu alaikum and selamat pagi to all participants joining from Indonesia. I think I have been specifically asked to give this presentation because I am currently involved in one of the projects with LKPP, which I am very proud that LKPP have asked ADB to assist. So my presentation today will be actually looking at ADB procurement framework and processes. And I have put some of the links in my presentation, which we are not going to be playing today. These are the links with the videos. And as some of my colleagues have mentioned, Bertrand have mentioned that sometimes images stick in your mind much more than the words. I would suggest that after this presentation is finished, the organizers actually give you the copy of the presentation, and you can play the videos as well. So let me start with an overview of Asian Development Bank and how does ADB procurement policy and regulations actually feed into our subject today. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I have the videos here on what ADB does, and it is an interesting introduction to ADB and the way how ADB actually invests in projects, in processes, in peoples and governance systems. And I'm just leaving it to you to watch how investment in the total human capital is actually helping ADB member countries, of which Indonesia is a founding member. Can we go to the next slide, please? So Asian Development Bank has been set up in 1966. Indonesia is a founding member of ADB, and from 31 member countries in its establishment in 1966, ADB has grown to encompass 68 member countries, of which 49 are from within Asia and Pacific, and 19 are outside. So ADB offers a range of financial products. Today, we are actually mostly focusing on our sovereign projects, but ADB also offers a range of products in non-sovereign space as well. If you want to learn more about non-sovereign lending, I suggest you check ADB website as well for the information. So the tools that are in sovereign space we are using are loans, technical assistance, and grants. We finance developing member countries or DMCs, governments, and public sector entities, including state-owned enterprises. Can we please go to the next slide? So in terms of ADB financing projects, we have sovereign financing, private sector financing. We also manage funds and resources for other organizations, and we also have co-financing partnerships. Today, you have heard that some of the projects that ADB does in the ADB regions are done with, for example, Agence de Development of the French Development Agency, with German development agencies, with European Investment Bank, Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank. In Pacific, we do a lot with Australian and New Zealand government, and also with World Bank. So why I'm mentioning this to you is when we co-finance projects, these opportunities are actually open to companies from ADB member countries, and that's why you might actually scout for opportunities where ADB is not necessarily a lead partner, but sometimes these opportunities would be open to you as well. Can we please go to the next slide? So again, I have provided some videos on ADB project cycle, and why do you need to know about this? Can we go to the next slide, please? So the various stages from country programming to project completion and evaluation are known collectively as ADB project cycle. I have seen in Q&A already one of the anonymous attendees asking why some projects in South Asia are actually larger in size than those projects in Indonesia. So the answer might be actually coming from the type of documents that I will be describing to you in very near future. And these documents are called country partnership strategy. So we start the country programming together with the countries, together with the developing member country, including ADB, including Indonesia. And we come together with the country on a proposed pipeline and priorities that are both priorities of the government and priorities of ADB. So documents that are produced in the course of the projects are disclosed throughout the project cycle, and they are governed by something that is called access to information policy by ADB. Access to information policy is an important policy document of ADB because it allows you to actually find information about the project, the information about business opportunities, and information that relates to the complexities of the projects, for example, resettlement plans, etc. So ADB provides financing for projects that will effectively contribute to the economic and social development of the country concerned, and have the strongest poverty reduction impact in conformity with the country and ADB strategies. You probably have heard about Paris alignment, and you know that climate change, for example, is a very important a very important consideration in looking at development projects. These are one of the criteria that ADB together with the country will be looking at, actually defining the projects that will be supported. Can we go to the next slide, please? So if we look at the ADB project cycle, we start with country partnership strategy. And in some instances, we also look at regional cooperation strategy. Why regional cooperation strategy is important? If you recall previous speakers, you probably remember that ADB is actually having one of its operational priorities in regional cooperation and integration. And you have heard about CAREC, that is Central Asian Regional Cooperation, SASEC. We also have GMS, which is a Greater Mekong Sub-region. We have other regional projects that actually go in its coverage, not just outside one country, but actually looking at the ties between different countries. Why it is also important to you? Because Indonesia is next door to Pacific, and regional cooperation strategy for Pacific, like 10 Pacific countries are covered by the Pacific approach. And this is one of the opportunities where you can be looking at exporting your services and your goods outside your own country by looking at opportunities at the source. Sorry, can you please go back to the slide? So out of the country partnership strategy and regional cooperation strategy, we come with a pipeline of projects, and every project comes with a preparation. Sometimes this comes with a ADB preparing the project using so-called TRCA approach, or the technical assistance that is administered by ADB. And sometimes it comes with TA loans or project readiness facility loan. So these are the opportunities for consultants to get involved in the preparation. The next side of the ADB project cycle is approval. This is when we bring the project to the approval of ADB board. And this is the only time when we do not need external parties such as consultants, contractors, or suppliers to actually assist us. In implementation, you probably noticed that Rustam Abdukayumov was talking about high reliance on quality consultants and engineers in implementation. These are the type of expertise we require. We also obviously require contractors and suppliers to actually implement projects with developing member countries. At completion or evaluation, about 25% of ADB projects are actually selected for lessons learned. And this is when we require consultants to review whether we have achieved what we set up to achieve together with developing member country. Next slide, please. So in terms of country partnership strategies, a lot was told today about Indonesia, but I understand that not everyone attending this seminar today is only looking for supplying domestically. Some of you might have big aspirations of actually exporting your services and exporting your goods outside Indonesia. And this is where you can actually look at country partnership strategies, perhaps in the neighboring countries, or if you are very ambitious outside, obviously taking into account logistical arrangements. Next slide, please. We have specific information on for each country of our operations with country planning documents and strategy and operations business plans. Obviously, strategies are the documents that are set up not every year. However, we have an updates for strategy documents, which are called country operations business plans, which also have the information that is more up to date for you on the projects. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here is a screenshot on country planning documents. And next slide, please. And this, excuse me, can we go to the next slide, please? So while you will find out where your opportunities are, now you will need to find out what are the rules of the game. How do you participate, and how do you get to access these opportunities? Here you will need to know the procurement framework. An ADB procurement framework consists of the following key documents: ADB procurement policy, ADB procurement regulations for the borrowers, so-called regulations, staff instructions, and associated guidance notes. So ADB procurement policy was approved by ADB Board of Directors, and this policy specifies ADB 6 core procurement principles, which I will cover a little bit later, and various considerations that are relevant to the implementation of the policy in ADB finance operations. Then we have the level of regulations that are approved by ADB management. The current version of ADB procurement regulations are approved in 2017. However, it may be revised from time to time to actually keep up with the development in supply markets. It sets up the rules that ADB borrowers need to follow, and also it sets up ADB procurement due diligence functions, including complaint mechanism. The staff instructions is actually defining the roles and responsibilities of ADB staff that are set up in implementing the policy and regulations. And the guidance notes are actually providing some of the up-to-date information about different procurement methods. Can we go to the next slide, please? So you probably have heard that I told you that procurement policy and procurement regulations for ADB borrowers have been approved in 2017. However, the average time ADB and the borrowers take to implement the project is 7 years. So we are on the tail end of the previous policy considerations, which have been defined by the procurement guidelines and the guidelines on use of consultants, which have been which are applying to the projects which have been processed pre-2017. The borrowers have the option to actually switch from the procurement guidelines to the procurement policy, and some of the borrowers have made this shift. The information available on ADB website would actually tell you which policy would apply to the procurement in question. Can we go to the next slide, please? So remember, I told you about 6 procurement principles. So by and large, we actually harmonize our procurement principles with other multilateral development institutions. However, we do have one defining difference. And what this difference is, I can tell you slightly later. So everyone have got economy, efficiency, fairness, and transparency and value for money in their core procurement principles. However, when ADB have actually combined the consulting guidelines and procurement guidelines in the new procurement policy, one of the considerations have always been core procurement principle for procurement of consulting services. And this has been a principle of achieving equality. So we actually, in the new procurement policy, we move the quality from the procurement principle of only consulting services to procurement principle for goods and works and plant as well. Next slide, please. The arrangements that we set up through project documentation need to be so-called fit for purpose. What does it mean? It means that we require procurement arrangements to appropriately reflect strategic needs and circumstances of the situation. We need to understand that countries such as Indonesia is very different from Tuvalu. So the arrangements that are appropriate to Tuvalu are not necessarily appropriate to Indonesia. And in case when standardized approach cannot effectively and efficiently meet project outcomes, we need to look at customized approach. And this customized approach comes in a process we'll call strategic procurement planning. So strategic procurement planning is one of the documents that is also disclosed on ADB websites together with the project documentation. And there we are looking at market sounding analysis to set up most appropriate procurement arrangements. Next slide, please. So what you need to understand that ADB is a country that is currently owned by 68 member countries. So why it is important? Because eligibility or nationality of the bidder is actually important in eligibility of the supplying goods, services, and consulting services as well, and works. So except in the cases in which board of directors agrees otherwise, loans or grants from special fund resources can only be used for procurement of goods, works, and services produced in or supplied from developed member countries that have contributed to such resources and developing member countries. What does it mean to you? It means that Indonesia is automatically eligible to actually supply goods, works, and services to countries who draw loans and grants from special fund resources. Loans or grants from ADB ordinary capital resources or ADB administered funds can only be used for procurement of goods, works, and services produced and supplied from member countries. Okay, next slide, please. So from time to time, ADB may agree on alternative procurement arrangements, and this may mean that we may use other multilateral or bilateral agencies' procurement arrangements. Next slide, please. So what kind of procurement methods and arrangements we have? We have open competitive bidding that comes with national or international advertisement, limited competitive bidding, framework agreements, requests for quotations, or previously known as shopping, electronic reverse auctions in cases when it's specified in procurement plans, direct contracting, and force accounts. Can we go to the next slide, please? So particular types of procurement arrangements that are covered in our procurement regulations are selection of consulting firms, specialized and individual consultants, procurement in fragile and conflict-affected situations, which include some of your neighbors, use of procurement agents, which is important in, for example, when you're supplying goods, good works and services to People's Republic of China, and also to some of the Pacific Island countries. support to governments for public-private partnerships, etc. So can we go to the next slide, please? So what are the roles and responsibilities of ADB? The borrower, or in case of loans for Indonesia, prepares the procurement plan that is agreed by ADB. And the borrower is legally responsible and accountable for this procurement. ADB is not party of the contract or the party to the bidding. However, we do review this for compliance with ADB procurement regulations. The responsibility for implementations also rests solely with the borrower. Next slide, please. So we review borrowers' procurement procedures, documents, bid evaluations, and award recommendations. And we may sometimes provide extended support. This extended support means that in some countries, notably in the Pacific, we actually conduct the consulting recruitment for the borrowers. Can we please go to the next slide? So, so far I was talking to you what are the responsibilities of ADB and what are the responsibilities of the borrower. You are participating in this seminar, and I suspect that you want to be a bidder. So what is your role and what is your responsibility? Your role and responsibility should be in critically reviewing bidding documents to see if there is any ambiguity, omission, or contradiction, and raise the issue through request for clarification. Sometimes we see that the documents are actually changed in response to such clarifications. The criteria and methodology for selection of successful bidders are outlined in the bidding documents. If these are not clear, it is in your best interest to clarify them. Can we please go to the next slide? So the specific bidding documents issued by the borrower govern each procurement transaction. And if bidder concludes, if you conclude that there are provisions that are inconsistent with the regulations, you need to raise this issue with the borrower. You can also raise the issue with ADB procurement specialist or ADB project officer. Okay, next slide, please. So why you are attending this seminar? You are attending this seminar to become successful. So how do you actually come to the successful participation in the bid? One of the things that you need to do, you need to supply the competitive bid, meaning it needs to be attractive enough to be selected. But another thing that you need to do, it does not need to be just attractive or competitive. It also needs to be conforming to the critical requirements, technical and commercial, that are specified in the bid documents. And that's why you would need to know how to supply compliant bid. Okay, so next slide, please. So information on bidding opportunities under open competitive bidding may be obtained from procurement plans that we actually disclose on ADB website and specific procurement notices. You know that we work with ADB member governments, including government of Indonesia, and a lot of opportunities are actually published electronically on LKPP website. So I suggest that you follow the information on ADB website and also on the electronic procurement websites of the countries in which you are interested in participating in bids. Next slide, please. So how do you search for opportunities? ADB website is the place where you need to be. So what I suggest you do, you need to look at the projects. And here I have actually shown you how to look for projects. Next slide, please. You can look at procurement plans. for specific projects. Next slide, please. And you can look at specific tender opportunities. So here you can see there is a column on status, and the column on status actually shows you whether this particular opportunity is active, meaning you still can apply, or this particular opportunity is already archived or closed. Can you please go to the next slide? What you also need to know is that ADB have taken a lot of effort to make information on procurement and procurement statistics is accessible to you. So I suggest that you check something called procurement statistics or ADB procurement dashboard or Proc Dash. And here you can see the opportunities that are already issued. Can you please go to the next slide? So here you can actually choose the contract year, and you can choose, for example, in 2021, more than $10 billion have been $10 billion of contracts have been awarded. And there you can see where these contracts have been awarded, who are your competitors, and where can you particularly actually focus your interest. Next slide, please. So here you can see that total operational procurement based on a contract year, and here the contract year is 2022. So, so far we have awarded contracts just to over $2 billion. But as you probably know, some of the opportunities are actually coming at the tail end. And so you probably need to be looking at opportunities happening now. Can you please go to the next slide? So in terms of policies that are applicable to recruitment of consultants and service providers, pre-2017, you're looking at guidelines on use of consultants, and post-2017, we are looking at unified ADB procurement policy. Next slide, please. So I understand that quite a few of you are actually consultants or experts. And for you, you would be very well advised to register in ADB consultant management system. Next slide, please. So ADB consultant management system allows you to search opportunities, view shortlisted firms, where you can actually jump on opportunity to set up partnership with them. And you can also view awarded contracts. That sometimes can be also an interesting statistics, but it can also give you an opportunity to set up partnership with someone with a track record of being successful. Next slide, please. So here I actually put some of the information that you can look from consulting services recruitment notices. Next slide, please. Where you can look at specific opportunities, even connected to the COVID-19 response. Next slide, please. So in profiles of the opportunities, we disclose profile, terms of reference, and cost estimates of the opportunities, where you can actually find out whether this is an opportunity you want to pursue. Can we please go through the slides? Next slide. So this is a terms of reference slide. Next slide, please. We are also disclosing the budgets. Disclosure of the budgets do not necessarily mean that you will be getting this budget, especially if you are an individual consultant, because the budget disclosed are the highest amounts that can be allocated to the assignment. And the offer normally depends on individual qualifications. Next slide, please. So we can look at the information on shortlisted firms, and if the opportunity is actually a little bit a way you can potentially jump on opportunity to be part of the team and offer your services to the shortlisted firms. Next slide, please. You can also look at historic information on who have been shortlisted. Next slide, please. And the same about awarded contracts. Next slide, please. So we want you to have the best experience with ADB IT systems, but sometimes they are a bit difficult to navigate. So if you are in doubt on how to use them, we suggest that you use quick reference guides for using the systems, and sometimes the visuals are what you need to know how to navigate the systems. Next slide, please. I gave some indications of where you can find it. Next slide, please. And here is just a flash on what is our new approach to consulting services. And this is more about moving more towards being faster, more efficient, more effective, and supporting quality submissions. Next slide, please. I have mentioned quite a lot about ADB procurement website. And if you take only one message from me today, this message will be your best friend is adb.org if you are looking at opportunities with ADB. Next slide, please. So ADB is also on LinkedIn, and in ADB, on LinkedIn, you can look at new information about Asian Development Bank's projects, and you can also join groups. These groups are of ADB consultants, the group that I actually manage, and it has over 8,000 members already, and ADB group for suppliers that is currently less popular, maybe because I don't manage it. Next one, that was a joke. So we suggest that you give us your feedback on this presentation by scanning this particular QR code. And I'm looking forward to your questions and more so to your participation in ADB funded opportunities. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Ibu Galia, for a very good presentations. I know a lot of informations that have to be absorbed by our colleagues of business actor, and all of them is quite important. And I would like to, I'm quite confused how to highlight about your presentation because a lot of them are quite important. But I would like to reference to your last words that the most important thing that you should check the www.adb.org for a lot of informations, and probably if I would like to your consent that we would share your slide because I
absolutely
think okay,
absolutely. This is possibly what I want you to do, and please do share the presentations.
Yes, I will gladly accept it and share it with our business actors in Indonesia. And we do have several questions. We would like to invite other audience, should they have any questions, to fill in the Q&A and or raise your hands. And then I would like to invite also our distinguished speakers to take a look at the Q&A. Probably later on you will have the time to answer the questions. And then we would like to move on to our last but not least speakers, Pak Rizal Rifai. He's a very is the one that already won a lot of bidders with the banks, and I would like to invite him to share the informations about being a successful bidders in ADB. Pak Rizal Rifai is independent consultant, has 20 years of experience in international field of public procurement, including infrastructure sectors, multinational organization companies, and international development partners. His area of expertise include procurement and contract management, good governance, compliance, project management, risk management, and P3s or public-private partnership or government cooperation with business entities. This is a very good opportunity to learn from him. So Pak Rizal, I think the screen is yours. I do have to remind you about the time because we do still have one session later on, which is the question and answer. Silakan Pak Rizal.
Halo, tes. Ya, thank you, Pak Theo. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to excuse my ADB colleague. I think for this time, I think I will present this in Bahasa Indonesia, if you don't mind. I understand there is translators, right? Okay. Okay. Right. Oke, selamat siang Bapak-Bapak, Ibu-Ibu. Pada kesempatan ini karena pengalaman saya adalah sebagai konsultan, maka saya akan mempresentasikan mengenai consultant services untuk opportunity di ADB kontrak ini gitu ya. Lanjut, silakan. Consultant service itu kalau di sini konteksnya adalah pekerjaan yang intellectual dan advisory service gitu. Jadi kalau ada pekerjaan yang misalnya ya service AC atau radar itu bukan termasuk ke dalam consultant service. Ya. Dalam konteks consultant service ini expert itu bekerja memberikan professional advice, mungkin juga ada teknologi transfer, mungkin ada training, ya kira-kira seperti itu skopnya. Konsultan itu bisa individual, bisa juga perusahaan. Ya, kalau tidak membutuhkan banyak individual dan tidak membutuhkan support dari headquarters, biasanya itu adalah pekerjaan individual, bukan pekerjaan perusahaan. Sebaliknya, kalau memang itu adalah pekerjaan teamwork, itu biasanya memang di-hire dalam bentuk perusahaan. Individual biasanya juga di-hire karena pengalaman dan qualification-nya itu yang lebih dominan gitu ya. Nah, dalam konteks pekerjaan-pekerjaan yang didanai oleh ADB ini sangat dimungkinkan sekali kita bekerja sama ya. Jadi perusahaan bekerja sama dengan perusahaan lain baik dalam bentuk joint venture maupun dalam bentuk subcontractor, subconsultant untuk mengerjakan pekerjaan yang diminta tersebut gitu ya. Jadi tidak selalu kita memiliki semua keahlian tersebut, bisa saja kita dalam bentuk bekerja sama, baik itu bekerja sama dengan perusahaan dari dalam negeri maupun dari perusahaan dari luar negeri. Gitu. Bisa lanjut. Ada beberapa tipe yang tadi juga mungkin sudah disampaikan oleh Galia dan juga oleh Rustam. Beberapa hal ini bisa konsultan itu di-hire langsung oleh ADB. Ada beberapa tipe di sana, itu ada bisa staff consultant, bisa juga TA consultant, dan juga ada opportunity juga untuk di-hire dalam bentuk framework contract gitu ya, kontrak payung. Ya, bisa juga konsultan itu direkrut oleh recipient, jadi adalah project implementing agency dari yang menerima dana ADB tersebut. Ya, tadi sudah disampaikan bisa saja dana ADB itu berbentuk tipe pinjaman atau grant yang macam-macam tipenya. Ya, ini juga sebetulnya ini beberapa tipe pekerjaan konsultan yang mungkin umum gitu ya ada. Dan ini sebetulnya sebagian juga bisa saja itu ADB hired gitu ya. Ini beberapa contoh saja seperti di masa sebelum terjadi investment biasanya ada sektor study atau feasibility study ya. Selama persiapan project, ingat tadi ada project cycle yang disampaikan oleh Galia. Itu adalah ada detail study misalnya ya, atau penyiapan dari spesifikasi teknis atau terms of reference, bahkan mungkin penyiapan dari dokumen tender gitu ya. Ini juga suatu yang pekerjaan konsultan. Bisa lanjut. Lanjut. Juga kalau untuk project implementation biasanya ini mungkin saja ada procurement consultant atau mungkin project management. Yang umum ini adalah supervisi konsultan atau inspection agent, ya. Bisa juga di information system, ya, IT consultant gitu ya, atau accounting atau audit. Atau bisa juga berupa technical assistance secara umum gitu ya, yang memberikan advisory service, mungkin melakukan studi ya, atau sifatnya itu capacity building, mungkin analisis institusional. Jadi banyak sekali range tipe-tipe pekerjaan konsultan yang mungkin bisa dilakukan di dalam proyek-proyek yang didanai ADB ini gitu. Ya, bisa lanjut. Ya, ini beberapa hal yang mungkin saya ingin sampaikan. Pertama adalah kalau kita ikut di dalam atau kita bisa terlibat di dalam pekerjaan yang didanai ADB ini sebenarnya memperluas kesempatan kita untuk mendapatkan pengalaman di dalam sebuah environment yang internasional gitu ya. Baik itu kontraknya maupun kompetisinya gitu ya. Jadi ada satu message yang sebetulnya tadi procurement principle yang sudah disampaikan Galia di situ gitu ya. Kita jangan takut untuk berkompetisi karena banyak dalam kompetisi ini, bahkan international competition pun sebetulnya banyak peserta dari Indonesia juga yang survive dan banyak menangnya juga gitu. Dan tadi sudah disampaikan juga opportunity itu tidak hanya di Indonesia, bisa saja mendapatkan opportunity untuk beberapa project yang ada di luar Indonesia gitu. Ya, banyak konsultan atau kontraktor Indonesia yang sebetulnya mampu untuk bisa mendapatkan pekerjaan-pekerjaan ini, sehingga dengan sistem kompetisi yang dibuka tadi itu memberikan celah kepada kita untuk bisa mendapatkan pengalaman internasional ini gitu ya. Tidak semua pekerjaan itu harus melalui reserve procurement ya. Kemudian juga hal kedua yang mungkin perlu untuk dipahami di sini adalah dalam setiap proyek yang didanai ADB itu hampir tidak ada barrier of entry. Semua requirement mengenai kualifikasi ya, persyaratan apapun itu dilakukan secara transparan. Ini akan terlihat di dalam dokumennya maupun di dalam pengumumannya gitu. Kalau kita mau bertanya, silahkan bertanya. Kalau kita ingin mendapatkan penjelasan tertentu bisa. Kalau kita mau komplain pun bisa gitu ya. Itu semua terbuka ya, semua terbuka. Sehingga tidak ada misalnya ada requirement bahwa yang kerja itu hanya boleh kontraktor dari atau konsultan dari sebuah negara. Itu tidak seperti itu. Ya, tadi seperti Galia juga sudah sampaikan secara procurement policy kita ADB ini sangat terbuka dan saya bisa melihat itu bagaimana treatment equal opportunity itu diberlakukan secara luas ya. Mengenai biasanya orang suka bertanya apalagi terkait dengan jasa konsultan gitu ya, lalu gimana rate-nya itu bagus apa enggak gitu ya. Saya sampaikan rate-nya relatif bagus karena memang biasanya ADB mendasarkan kepada harga pasar. Memang ada sedikit obstacle kalau misalnya kontrak itu dilakukan oleh resipien. Sebetulnya di dalam konsep kompetisinya ADB tetap memakai harga pasar di situ. Hanya seringkali resipien ini mematok owner's estimate yang mungkin berdasarkan satu standar tertentu sehingga seolah-olah qualified consultant dari berbagai negara ataupun dari dalam negeri itu menjadi sulit untuk masuk karena adanya restriksi dari biaya ini. Tapi sebetulnya secara peraturan itu sebenarnya tidak ada restriksi seperti itu karena itu berdasarkan murni dari bagaimana pricing yang biasa dipakai oleh konsultan. Otomatis pasti ada batas dalam konteks adalah bagaimanapun kantong kita kan nggak semuanya bebas begitu saja, pasti ada batas atas, pasti ada gitu ya. Namun itu relatif cukup luas untuk kita yang kualifikasi bagus untuk bisa masuk di situ. Ya, banyak perusahaan-perusahaan konsultan yang cukup ternama di luar negeri itu sangat tertarik dan dominan di dalam proyek-proyek ADB ini gitu ya. Mereka yang biasa berani menawarkan harga juga walaupun tinggi tapi kompetitif berdasarkan kualifikasinya mereka gitu ya. Nah ini kemudian juga yang juga cukup nyaman kalau kita mengikuti kontrak di proyek-proyek ADB ini adalah terkait dengan adanya satu konsep yang namanya integrity. Ya, integrity ini yang dituntut adalah highest standard of ethics. Ya, ini baik kontrak dengan ADB-nya langsung maupun kita kontrak dengan penerima bantuan dari ADB, itu unsur integrity ini sangat ditekankan. Tujuannya bukan untuk nakut-nakutin kita sebagai peserta tendernya, tetapi justru ini untuk melindungi, ya, ya, karena hak-hak kita juga dilindungi di situ. Artinya apa? Di sini kita diharapkan memang menunjukkan profesionalisme dengan standar etik yang cukup tinggi karena ADB juga punya sistem untuk bisa mendeteksi hal-hal yang terkait dengan seandainya standar etika ini dilanggar gitu ya. Bagaimana konsep konflik of interest misalnya itu bisa ditegakkan dengan cukup luas sehingga bisa menjamin sebuah kompetisi yang baik dan juga menjamin bagaimana kita untuk bisa memberikan performance yang bagus di dalam proyek tersebut. Ya, nah ini adalah satu konsep yang menyatu di dalam kontrak maupun pengadaan yang ada di ADB, baik itu kontrak langsung dengan ADB maupun kontrak dengan resipien. Ya. Saya kira itu Pak Theo, Bapak Ibu semua yang bisa saya share pada kesempatan kali ini. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Rizal. Ini sangat inspiratif ya Pak ya. Jadi memang tidak perlu khawatir gitu ya. Dan rate-nya tadi terutama rate, saya dengar rate-nya Pak, rate standar market itu benar-benar menarik mungkin. Nah, saya akan switch lagi ke bahasa Inggris. Thank you Pak Rizal for the excellent presentations. It's quite inspiring and hopefully our colleague from business actors could follow your footstep in having or at least trying to have the opportunity to involve in ADB's project. So we would like to move on to our next sessions. We arrive in the question and answer sessions. Our colleagues from LKPP already summarized the Q&A for today's sessions. Would like to move to the next question. The first question is anonymous. This is an opinion that ADB project Indonesia is not as massive as in South Asia. I think Ms. Galia already tried to brought up this kind of issue. I would like to inquire our distinguished speakers to answer the first questions. Probably I would like to address the first question to Mr. Bertrand, if I may. And afterwards, I would like to invite Ms. Galia for the same question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure I can bring much of an answer to that. So maybe my colleagues are more familiar with the specifics of Indonesia. I would also like to mention that there was a question on the specific urban transport project in Indonesia, so I responded in the chat. So sorry for not providing a more detailed answer on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bertrand. I would like to invite Ms. Galia.
Thank you very much, Theodore. As I responded that the size of the projects in Indonesia or India as a country is actually defined by the mutual process, and the mutual process is called country partnership strategy. So many considerations actually come into place. One of them is absorptive capacity of the government to actually implement the projects. But it's also the ability to service debt. while ADB provides loans on a very good terms, still it is debts that Indonesian government is actually taking on board. And I understand this would be in consideration by both Indonesian government and ADB in considering the size of the projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galia, for the answer. I hope it satisfies Mr. or Ms. Anonymous that already brought up the questions.
Maybe I can also, Pathio,
Yes.
maybe I can also come in. So
please.
During the pre-COVID times, right, what we saw was there was a kind of a bit of a trend where approximately about $1 billion a year would be provided as part of our sovereign lending program in the form of policy-based lending. So that's not for specific infrastructure, but from a budget support perspective. And the other large projects that you will find in our portfolio, this is pre-COVID, were the projects with respect to the energy sector. So we have a range of results-based lending projects which focus on strengthening of the power grid across the entire country. So there was huge interventions in that area. And perhaps the question that came, maybe it was more focused on the transport sector. And that is correct that maybe about 2 decades ago, there was far larger transport portfolio. And we have slowly started re-engaging in the sector. And you saw the loan that we had for Central Sulawesi that engaged us both in the airport as well as the port sector. And we are also processing another loan for approval for next year. This is for the Trans-South Java project. And it's about 72 kilometers section around Jember and Banyuwangi. So what we are seeing is that there is a trend to expand support to transport. And after the 2023 approval for this South Java project, we will then target the urban transport projects that I had mentioned earlier, both for the East-West line for the Jakarta MRT, as well as the e-bus project with PT Damri. So let me stop there. Hopefully that adds a little bit more color.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kari. Hopefully this is can address the questions brought up by the Ms. Anonymous. Okay, moving on to the next questions. Also, to Mr. Bertrand, I think, could you please elaborate more on specific subsector about transport project in Indonesia, as you mentioned earlier in the slide? And could you share with us the project or investment of transport project funded by ADB in Indonesia? Mr. Bertrand, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide some information, but I think we are lucky to have Amar with us, and he's more familiar with the specifics of the transport portfolio in Indonesia. So the two projects that have been mentioned, this electric bus project, I like to say that these are exactly the type of intervention we are supporting. It's innovative and climate aligned. And the second one is the East-West MRT line project in Jakarta. Again, similar to the type of project DB would like to support. But if you indulge me, I will hand it over to Amar for more details. If Amar, you have more details to share on this project, maybe on the timeline and the size of the project. Amar?
Yeah.
Ms. Amar?
Thanks, Bertrand. So for the Trans-South Java project, we are looking at about roughly 380 million loan. This is for 2023. And then our the Jakarta MRT, roughly we are talking about 500 million. That's in our lending pipeline. This will be co-financed with JICA. And then we are also in the midst of preparing another road project in Kalimantan, and that's going to be about 300 million. In the year 2025, there are some discussions ongoing to also support port development. But obviously, given the, we have a couple of years to work on trying to discuss with DGC Transport and Ministry of Transportation as a whole, what should be the area of focus. As you know, we've already been working on the Palu port rehabilitation, and so discussions need to be had where ADB should be focusing on moving forward geographically. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. I hope it clarifies and is quite detail about what transport project in Indonesia, the MRT, and also in Kalimantan and in Java. Okay, we can move on to the next questions. To Mr. Amar, thank you for your presentation. Could you please share with us regarding the involvement of private sectors in water supply projects as you shared on the slide? Is it more effective or efficient for the success of the project?
No, thank you for that question. And this is essentially, you may recall during my remarks, I had referenced the technical assistance loan titled the Energy Services Project, the ESP. And one of the things that we are trying to do through that technical assistance loan is to be able to develop together with SDA and Cipta Karya and the Ministry of Public Works and Housing. We are trying to develop a new scheme, this source to tap scheme that I had referred to earlier, because absolutely private sector investment is something that brings a certain level of efficiency and certain amount of rigor, because you have commercial lenders, you have sponsors that are very carefully taking a look at the feasibility of the project. They are thinking through the revenue profile to be able to service the debts properly. So having private sector involvement not only eases the burden on the government budget, but also brings extra rigor in the development and the implementation of the project. So that is certainly conceptually very much supported both from the government side and certainly from the ADB side. Now, the question is how to make sure that that scheme actually works well, because there are water supply projects ongoing where there was involvement from private sector side, and there were some hurdles. And the list of those is quite complex. Some relate to whether the off-takers from the PDAMs are able to actually pay for the water, right? And some actually relate to being able to supply enough raw water that was necessary on the downstream side. So there are a whole range of issues that have come up in our experience, and which is why we are working collectively both with our sovereign teams as well as with our PPP transaction advisory teams to come in and help the Ministry of Public Works in properly structuring these projects. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Amar. I would like to move on to the next questions. We do have several questions. This is from PT Rosaliska. I would like to introduce ourselves as a contractor from PT Rosaliska. We are specialists in installations of wastewater pumping and wastewater treatment plants. We also work on various projects funded by ADB. We ask for the requirement for the tender document. We hope that there will be ease ease of requirement for participating in the tender, especially the financial requirement, to make it easier. I know that the urban project is on Mr. Amar. I would like to first give the screen to you and probably later on to Ibu Galia. Thank you.
Yeah, no, so let me first thank our friends from PT Rosa Liska for their participation in ADB funded projects. And as our country director mentioned in his opening remarks that, having strong contractors work on these ADB finance projects is critical for success. So we very much thank you for your participation in the other projects. Now, in terms of tender documents, these are still very much under preparation, but as you would appreciate that the requirements, the qualification requirements have to be tailored to the scale of the wastewater treatment plants that are being designed and are going to be constructed. So there is a little bit of sensitivity to making sure that you're able to bring in the contractors that have the experience to be able to successfully deliver those projects, right? So certainly that being said, you will very much be aware that the Ministry of Public Works and Housing is very sensitive to this area, and to my knowledge, when they scrutinize the tender documents, they're also looking to make sure that there will be active participation from local bidders. So certainly the government from that side is also very interested in ensuring that we have good competition coming in, and especially from Indonesian contractors as well. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Amar. I would like to invite Ms. Galia.
Thank you, Theodore. Without actually knowing what exactly are the requirements that PT Rosa Liska wants to be eased or be easier, I have actually provided response in Q&A. And we need to know that there are multiple financial criteria in the bid documents. One of them is financial size of the company, and similar type of contracts that the company have undertaken, and also ability to ascertain that the potential bidder is solvent and is able to serve the requirements of the projects through access to financial resources. So all of these criteria is the criteria that are practically a risk management criteria applied to every responsible type of public procurement. However, there is one financial requirement that may or may not be in question for the bidders is the amount of bid security. Normally, the amount of bid security is set at around 2% of the budgeted amount, and it needs to be coming in a specified form. So ADB is actually not specifically requiring the bid security to be in terms of it checks from the banks, and it may actually take form of the bid securing declaration as well. So it is up to the borrower to decide whether they are looking at bid security or bid securing declaration. But the other criteria are actually the criteria that are relevant to the size, scope, and complexity of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Galia. Hopefully, PT Rosa Liska could satisfy with the answer. But before we move on to the next questions, I would like to invite from PT Rosa Liska, do you have any more comments further or any more questions? I would like to invite you, should you want to go to the participate in direct questions, just raise hand. If not, we can move on to the next questions. Okay. We can move on to the next questions. Hopefully it satisfies you, the answer. Okay, next questions. I've been warned by our colleagues in the committee that the time is up. So I probably think this is the last questions to Pak Rizal. Apakah ada saran bagi kami untuk partisipasi memenangkan proyek ADB, mengingat belum ada pengalaman ikut proyek. Jadi bagi yang belum ikut proyek ADB, Pak, apakah ada saran gitu kira-kira tips untuk memenangkan atau menjadi successful bidder di proyek-proyek ADB? Silakan Pak Rizal, the screen is yours.
Ya, terima kasih. Jadi saya kira tidak ada satu requirement di dalam ikut proyek ADB sudah pernah ikutan proyek ADB sebelumnya gitu ya. Jadi pengalaman itu bisa didapat dari mana saja untuk bisa ikutan proyek-proyek yang didanai oleh ADB. Yang penting kita perlu memahami persyaratan dari kualifikasinya itu apa, ya persyaratan untuk kriteria evaluasinya apa. Seperti Galia juga ada merespon di pertanyaan yang lain tadi. Jadi saya ingin quote juga. Itu penting untuk kita memahami. Jadi misalnya ada satu paket pengadaan yang kita interested, kita perlu melihat di situ persyaratan kualifikasinya apa dan persyaratan kriteria evaluasinya apa. Ya, misalnya pun di situ, wah kita belum bisa memenuhi semuanya dalam konteks konsultan itu, ya kontraktor juga termasuk. Bisa saja itu dengan bekerja sama dengan perusahaan lain atau pihak lain. Untuk supaya bisa memenuhi kriteria evaluasi maupun persyaratan kualifikasi tersebut gitu ya. Nah, jadi semua pengalaman yang Bapak Ibu pernah lakukan di proyek-proyek lain, baik itu proyek donor ataupun proyek-proyek nasional ataupun nanti ada pun proyek-proyek lain yang mungkin ada di luar negeri, itu bisa dimanfaatkan sepanjang itu memang memenuhi apa yang diminta di dalam kriteria evaluasinya atau di dalam persyaratan kualifikasinya. Itu Pak. Makasih Pak.
Terima kasih Pak Rizal. Semoga bisa membantu ya. Tadi di-highlight oleh Pak Rizal itu bisa dapat dari mana aja pengalamannya, dan yang penting ya itulah coba memulai gitu ya Pak ya. Saya lihat memang ada beberapa resen dan masih ada beberapa pertanyaan, cuma sayang sekali the time is up. So we'd like to conclude our session for today's meeting. I would like to also remind you that tomorrow there is also still have the business opportunity seminar, and we can jump in the questions for tomorrow's session as well. And with that, I would like to express my highest gratitude to our distinguished speaker for today, Mr. Bertrand, Mr. Amar, Ms. Galia, and Mr. Rizal for already having us today in this business opportunity seminar. And I would like to hand the floor over to our master of ceremony for today's event, Pak Meksi.
Baik, terima kasih. Cek 1, 2. Baik, terima kasih Pak Theo untuk sudah memoderatori sesi hari ini. Bapak Ibu peserta partisipan hari ini, izin mengingatkan juga bahwa besok kita masih ada kegiatan juga di waktu yang sama jam 9 pagi untuk tanggal 28 Juli, dan mungkin juga dengan materi-materi yang baru begitu ya, yang juga berkembang dari diskusi hari ini. Hari ini kita sudah menyelesaikan ada terkait tentang ADB Business Opportunities untuk Project Pipelines, lalu kemudian ada Transport Sector Urban Development, kemudian ada ADB Procurement System and Business Opportunities, dan ADB Update on Procurement Process and System. Termasuk juga tadi ada testimoni dari presentation of an Indonesian successful bidder of an ADB project. Nah, Bapak Ibu, demikian informasi dari kami sebelum kita menutup kegiatan pada pagi hingga siang hari ini. Izin kembali mengingatkan agar Bapak Ibu dapat mengisi absensi yang sudah disampaikan oleh teman-teman panitia pada kolom chatting, dan juga ada form evaluasi yang perlu diisi. Terima kasih untuk para narasumber dan juga pada partisipan yang sudah hadir pada hari ini tepat waktu. Besok kita juga akan mulai jam 9 pagi, jangan lupa untuk juga hadir tepat waktu. Akhir kata, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Santi Santi Om, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, salam sehat, salam pengadaan. Terima kasih.